Hello, everybody. A warm welcome from Berlin, as usual. Today I'm with Kilian, and we have a new topic, which is a feature of the just released new IBM Cloud Pak for AIOps version 4.7.1, and it's role-based access control, in short, RBAC. And with that, we do have prepared a scenario. And the scenario is going to feature a few persons, an administrator, Kilian, Steve, and Matt. The administrator has full access to everything. So we do have the London Underground station data, which is the inner and the outer stations. We do have a ticketing application in there. And we do have Kilian. Kilian is part of the stations team. He has access to alerts and resources of all stations. We do have Steve, which is part of the ticketing application team. And we have Matt. Matt is the new guy on the block, and he will be implemented during the demo into the central line team. So how does this all work? Well, we do have restriction filters. Those control the access to the data, which the users can see. They give you access or denial to tools, resources, and alerts. And we do have a new feature, which is called redaction policies. This is a modularization feature, which is manipulating the final JSON outputs that is created from the system and before it is going to be rendered in the user interface. And then last but not least, we do have profiles. Profiles do combine filters, these policies, and user groups. And how all that works is going to be demoed by Kilian. And we do have at the last but not least section a documentation link. And with that, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Kilian to take it off. Thank you.
Today we'll be looking at AIOps' new RBAC capability. In this scenario, we have two key types of data, London Underground station data and ticketing application data. Viewing this data will be for individual users. Firstly, we have our admin, which we're looking at currently, who is able to see all the data in the system. Next, we have Kilian, who's part of the stations team, and he's only able to view data associated with the station's data. So this includes the application's resource groups and resources, as well as the alerts associated with those stations. Next, we have Steve. Steve is only allowed to view the information associated with the application. So in this case, he can see application alerts. And if we switch over to the resource management view, we can see that he can only see the ticketing app and the various resources associated with that application. And finally, we have Matt. Matt is a new joiner to the team. So currently the default is that he will view no data within the system. So this includes all of the resource management page, as well as the alerts and incidents. Now, Matt will be part of the central line team, and he'll be able to only view the central line's stations. So let's look at how we create our RBAC policy definitions. So we switch back to our admin view, and we'll switch over to the admin page. The RBAC feature is created of two key components: restriction filters, which utilize the current filtering experience in AIOps today to allow us to reduce the data that's shown to the users. So this allows us to specify filter criteria that says, under these situations, the user should only see these alerts, applications, resource groups, or resources based on these conditions. This allows us to reduce the set of data shown to the end user. The secondary part is redaction policies. This works alongside the filtering, but allows us to modify the end payload of the entities that the end user will see. This uses OPA policies and the Rego language to define logic, which allows us to manipulate the end JSON output, either by hiding or showing all the properties, or redacting or modifying particular properties. And again, this can be applied across all the data types in the system. And finally, we have profiles. Profiles is what allows us to combine the restriction filters, the redaction policies, and the end user groups into the final redaction criteria. By default, we will always have a base profile. This base profile should be set up to reduce the data to the minimum set that you would like any user to see in your system. After that, you can create a group profile, which will allow you to expose more data to specific user groups. In this case, we have created a couple of different group profiles, one for the app team, one for the stations team, and one for the admins. If we go look at stations team, we can see how this is comprised. So to start with, we'll have our definition of what the profile is going to be called. Here we're able to select which user groups are assigned to this profile. In this case, it's just the stations teams. And then here along the side, for each of the different data types, we can start to specify which filters are applied. So in this case, we're going to limit to only station filters. And if we went down to resources here, we can see that we're only going to allow the station resources to be shown. And in this case, we're also going to apply an additional redaction filter to the stations. So let's create a new group profile for Matt's new team, which is to only view the central line stations. To do this, we're going to be using an existing restriction filter that we've created earlier, which is to limit the stations to only central line. So if we click here, we can actually launch out and view the station and actually see what this filter is doing. So if we expose the filter here, we can see that we're saying only show us stuff which has the tag of central line stations. Along with that, we're also going to use the redaction policy, if we open this up, which we created earlier, which is to allow us to limit resources shown based on that tag again, using the central line station. But additionally to this, we're also going to remove some key properties, in this case being geolocation, latitude, longitude, and zone. In this builder experience, we can also use test input to make sure that the policy is acting the way we expect. So if we look here, we can see in our data set, we've got the geolocation information there, as well as the longitude and latitude, and the zone information. So now we're going to click test, and this will run this policy against this test input. And then we can actually see the output has now successfully managed to remove those key properties. So once we're happy with that, we can now go back and let's create this profile. So we're going to call it central line teams. We're going to assign central line stations users. We're going to enable this. And in this case, we're just focusing on the resources. So we go over to our special central line station resource filter, and then we're also going to apply our redaction filter for central, and then we're going to save this profile. Now, if we flick back over to Matt, which we saw before was accessing none of his data and specifically was unable to access no resources, but now we can see he's able to access all the central line stations, so all 57 in London. Now, if we were to open up one of these stations and view the topology, we'd be able to see all the central line stations show as normal, but any other stations which aren't central line stations have been successfully redacted away so that we're unable to see any data associated with them. And if we were to go look at the properties, we can also see the properties have been redacted as well. Now let's flick over to the alerts associated with Matt. Here we can see by default, the base redaction policy allows us to see the state and the summary of the alerts associated with the stations. However, we're unable to see the sender and the resource information. So let's look at how we can build up a policy from scratch here to allow us to see the resource and sender information. So if we flip back to our admin view, here we can see all the various policies that we've created previously. And now we'll click on create redaction policy. And by default, you'll be shown an empty screen. Here we can select which type of data type we're targeting. In this case, we're going to target alerts. You can start to write your policy from scratch, or what you can do is click on load example. This will load an example policy, including some example JSON payload, so that you can start working straight away. First thing we need to do before we can run this policy is to name it accordingly. So here we have our package name. This needs to match the package name defined here, and it needs to be unique to the system. So in this case, we're going to call it central. And we can copy and paste this up into our top package name at the top. And you see here that now the test has become available for us to check. So we click this, and now we can see the outcome of this policy, which is effectively saying if the entity, which is the alert, has the team banking, then it can pass. So if we look here, we can see that our team is banking. But if we change this to station, for instance, and we run the test again, here we can see the base properties that will always be shown. Now let's look at modifying this so that we can bring in the resource and the sender information. So here you can see an example, there's various different ways of doing stuff. In this case, what we're interested in looking at is this filter option. So if we delete the other examples here, and we can clear this away, and we'll just clean this up nicely. Here we can see that this is going to bring in the details and the resource name. So if we look right now at our current output, we can see here on the left-hand side that it's upset by the formatting, so we can simply click Format. This will auto-format your policy to make it compliant. And if we click Test again, we can run the test and we can see the output. So now we can see that we've got the details and we've also got the resource, but we're only seeing the resource name. So in this case, what we want to do is modify this a little bit. So rather than details, we're going to put this as sender. And in this case, we also want to see all of the resource. So now we get sender and resource. If we click Test again, we can see the details is being removed, but now we have the full resource information and the full sender information. Now, if we wanted to see what this would look like in combination with the base policy, at the top, we can apply the base policy that's currently being applied. So you'll see here, the base policy by default is always exposing summary and severity. And if we click Test again, what we'll see down at the very bottom is a breakdown of the various policies that have been run to build up the end result. So here we can see the base exposed severity and summary, and this secondary policy that we've just created is exposing resource and sender, and these will be combined to form the final output. Now, if we wanted to test this against some real JSON, so in this case, we want to test it against one of the tube stations, we can simply go over into a live alert. And if we open this up now, we can see here, we can click on the raw example and we can actually copy this to clipboard. And then we can go back here, we can select this, and then we can paste in our new alert. So in this case now, we've got our alert that's come from a particular service. And if we click test, now we can actually verify that this policy works the way we intend using the actual alert data that we're intending to use. So from this point onwards, we can save this, and then we can go back to our profiles, go back to our central line team, edit this. And if we go to the alerts here, we can then select our central line alert and save it. Now we'll flip back to the alerts view and we hopefully will be able to see this in action. By default, the system will update all the policies associated with all the users, and this can take a couple of minutes before the system updates its cache, and you'll see the final results. And here we can see, now we're seeing the sender and the resource information associated with these alerts. And if we were to open it up, and again look at the raw view, we can now see the full output here. So here we can see how easy it is to update the redaction policies associated with this view. Now, if we wanted to apply a separate filter now, so that we only see the critical alerts, we can easily apply that. So let's flick back over to our admin view and start creating a filter that will allow us to look at the stations with only critical. So here we have our alerts from the admin perspective. Now, if we go to the filter which we're using to only show the station alerts, we can open that up. This now only shows the station alerts. We can see that it's being applied here. And now we want to extend this to say, okay, we only want it to show critical station alerts. So now applying this filter, we can then click here and we can create a new restriction filter. So this we'll call critical stations. And we'll apply this to our admin view so they can apply it to the policy. We'll click Save Restriction Filter, go back to our policies view. We'll open up the central lines teams again, move over to the alert section and change this to critical stations. Click Save Profile. Now if we move back over to Matt again, and we'll see hopefully that the stations will be filtered down once we refresh the page. And now we can see that we've applied our filter, which is now only showing us critical stations, as well as having the redaction policy applying to the sender and the resource. And finally, if we move over to the incidents, we can see the combination of all the work that we've just applied here. So if we were to open up one of these incidents, we can see that we've got our topological filtering being applied, so we can only see the central line stations and everything else is redacted. And if we were to move over into the alerts, we can see that this user can only see the critical station alerts associated with this incident. Everything else is being filtered away, but they're still able to use the full incident experience. Hopefully this demo has allowed you to see how AIOps' RBAC functionality works, and how it can easily be applied to split the data across your whole system into specific views, which differs from a multi-tenancy application where the data is specifically siloed into locked off sections.
Thank you, Kilian. That was fantastic. You provided a really great insight into how to use the new role-based access control module. So it's quite a number of things to consider. And if you want to have a deeper read into, of course, we do have documentation prepared and updated. Here's a link into the whole thing. So it's under Managing User Access Control. There you find, as an administrator for role-based access control, yada, yada, yada. And then all these nitty-gritty details. So quite a number of things that you need to consider to set this whole thing up. This is definitely something that has been requested for a long, long time. So I wish you a lot of fun with using and trying it out. And with that, I want to thank Kilian for preparing all this material and the demo, as well as you, the audience, to spend again so much time with us learning about IBM Cloud Pak for AIOps. So thank you, and see you again in another video of AIOps Explained. Bye.